are ready, Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay. I'll call this special city council meeting to order. It's a October 24th, 2022 special city council meeting of the Seward City Council. We're calling it to order at 5:30. Councilmember Osenga, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Tonight's roll call: Calhoun.
Here.
Wells.
Here.
DeMoss.
Here.
Finch is excused. Osenga.
Here.
And Mayor McClure.
Here.
Actually, Finch is four.
Almost.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, we're down to citizens' comments on any subject except items scheduled for public hearing. We have no items in this meeting for public hearing. If you've signed in, you'll be given 3 minutes at the beginning, and then if you haven't signed in, we'll ask for a show of hands. And this could go on for 36 minutes if there are that many people out there. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed in?
I do not actually have a sign-in sheet.
Oh, well, that's okay. Does anyone want to speak at this point? Okay, you know how to do it.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I forgot something, so I had to run here. Okay. My name is Kat Sorensen. I live inside city limits, and I am the director of the Seward Chamber of Commerce. And today, when you're going over the city manager's part, there's a subject in there for the Seward Chamber allocation. And at first, I was gonna admit, scared. Never like seeing an asterisk next to your budget line item in a larger thing. But as we moved forward and talked to my board about it, it's definitely time for us to open a resolution to further discuss the relationship of the chamber with the city. The city resolution was passed in 1997, and our relationship has changed so significantly since then. One, between you and I, and two, as a city, between us with our visitors. The visitor numbers have gone up a lot since then, and while the resolution clearly states that our purpose with our contract is to do visitor marketing and destination marketing, we do a lot more than that. I've come up every month and tell you all of the awesome things we do for the community. So I just kind of, leading into that discussion, want to touch base and say that I am really excited to open that discussion so that we can move forward and create a resolution that really clarifies what we do as an entity in our relationship with the city. I wrote something and I realized that I forgot to read it. So there's a cool line in there that I wanted to highlight too. One is that while we may stay at a static level, the state of Alaska is always increasing their tourism budget. This year they're going to be doing $10 million towards tourism, which is a lot, especially on our end since we are the 5th highest visited destination. So it's interesting to think about all of that money being pushed towards destination marketing and then how we will be able to be impacted by that. So even if we don't continue focusing solely on that, we need to focus on destination and visitor management so that those visitors that are being attracted by the state know what they're going to do when they get to Seward, how to interact with the community, and then some. And on top of all that, we also work to provide year-round industry, support for our local nonprofits, support for our local community, and so much more. It's our constant goal to make Seward a better place to live, work, and play. And I hope that if opening the legislative Pandora box on the city and chambers agreement means that our budget allocation formula is readdressed, I would just ask the city council and the citizens to remember how much the chamber does to promote growth, community, and excitement into Seward, and how hard we work to do so. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda and the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, we're ready to vote, Madam Clerk.
Voting on tonight's agenda, a consent agenda: Osenga.
Yes.
Calhoun.
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
Demas.
Yes.
And Vice Mayor McClure.
Yes.
Your agenda is approved and you have no items on consent tonight.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to new business, which we will now be, I'll need a motion and a second to go into a committee of the whole to discuss the 2023-24 City of Seward budget.
I move to go into the committee as a whole to discuss the 2023-2024 Seward City budget.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, we're ready to vote.
Voting to move into committee of the whole, Osenga,
Yes.
Calhoun,
Yes.
Demas.
Yes.
Wells,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McClure.
Yes.
You are moving into, that motion is approved. You're moving into committee at 5:36 PM.
Thank you very much. Okay, so on tonight's agenda, we have community development, P&Z, and also the city manager and PACAB's budgets. I'm not seeing a lot of public out there, but I will continue to allow, after each presentation, people could speak for 5 minutes and ask questions if they would like, each individual, because that's what I'm doing. So, administration, do you want to start with anything before we get the P&Z and community development?
I don't have anything other than Director Bickling is going to start us off with community development, P&Z, and then we'll move on from there.
Okay, and I'd ask you to give us the page numbers as if you've got them handy.
So we're going to be going over kind of the community development, which is on page 18 of 66, or it says also page 35 in the other corner. Then also, we do have, there's some pieces we're going to be kind of crosswalking back and forth with the planning and zoning, which is on like 1266 or page 29. Just because we draw some of our staffing from both of those, and so it's kind of have to walk them back and forth a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Our budget is not really, I guess, would say super complex, but I do want to talk about some changes that we have going on, both, I would say actual changes and some accounting changes that we're working through. Our personnel costs this year, obviously the personnel makes up a good deal of our budget. And so, two pieces is that we reclassified a position. We have someone who's classified as a GIS technician now, because that's actually 90% of their job, and they're qualified for that. And so that's going to increase our overall costs a little bit as we're looking to next year. And what that has allowed us to do, in all actuality, is allowed us to save money. We were spending, and that's just kind of in the general 6,000 if we look at the salaries, but. We were spending about $220 an hour for a GIS contract for flow analytics, and then we had some other side work that was going on. And so internalizing this GIS position really kind of sets us up as a city for stepping up in the long run. Most municipalities do have kind of a GIS staff or GIS technician as most of their utility work, whether that's public works, Parks and Rec, cemeteries, these things are all digitized for both, I would say, external users and internal users. And so, anyway, I do think that is, even though it does show it is a greater cost, we are technically saving money on some of our contract work. And then the other kind of, I would say, change to our staffing is when I came in, we were just dedicating 10% across the board of our staffing budgets to planning and zoning. But we went ahead and we did kind of a little bit of a looking at like how much do we actually spend on those tasks. And so we found out that Courtney, our planner, actually spends about 35% of her time with planning and zoning tasks, prepping and that type of thing. And so we did change that allocation from kind of that flat 10 across the board. And so that's why you'll see kind of an increase in salaries coming into future years, is because we are actually allocating our planner's time accordingly over to that budget. So, and just so you guys know too, to speak a little bit more to the GIS work, is that in the long run, having that GIS technician is going to save the city a lot of money. And just to give a practical example, when someone like Jason, who works for Public Works, is out in the field and he's standing over a position, and he needs to know where the as-built is. Right now, he has to drive back, go find the as-built, dig through the files, and so the GIS work that they're doing internally will allow him to just go ahead and on his tablet right there at the site, it'll geolocate him, find out, he can pull up the as-built right there, and so it's going to be a real efficiency gainer for most departments in that way. Do you have any questions in regards to salaries or?
Madam City Manager.
Thank you. I just wanted to, Jason said it, but reiterate, it is not a new position. It is a reclassified position. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he reduced the admin support down to 10% of the job duties, and then the rest is spent on the GIS tasks.
Madam Clerk, is MC on
He
the
is.
phone? I didn't mention
He is,
that. So
yep.
we have from Carmen Jackson.
He's
Yep.
available anytime you
Yeah.
want to ask him.
So if you guys have questions too, I'm sorry I didn't mention it. Does anybody have questions for Jason on the budget? Not right now.
Okay, we'll keep going. So, kind of looking into the non-personnel costs, feel free to ask questions at any time, but I did want to just kind of address probably some bigger numbers that are there. So, the 7009, where it's called contracted services, there's a lot of money that has been flowing through there, because normally what happens if we're doing any type of like engineering or consulting or these types of things, even though it might be for the harbor, Public Works, these items, it's been kind of been channeling through our department, and so which creates obviously some very large numbers in that way. But then we are working towards cleaning that up a little bit, and although like it may come through us sometimes, we are going to allocate those costs back to like Public Works, for instance, or if it was a harbor engineering project, turn it back around and connect it back into those projects that are coming through. So there is kind of a cleanup. So we will still have a certain amount of contracted services for things like feasibility studies and that come through, because community development is the most appropriate, but in the long run, it'll probably be a more kind of a little bit better predictable amount in that way, because people will be kind of taking care of some of those contracted services in the end. So, any questions about that, how that works?
Any questions? Councilmember Wells.
I was just curious, I see that we were budgeted for 2022, 587,000 and some change. And that our year-to-date's currently 237 and some change. And I'm just curious, do you foresee us hitting that 500,000 mark?
No, I don't think so. And actually, we do have an updated year-to-date that's a little bit closer to 400. So we are kind of getting closer there as we roll up to the year. But a lot of that too is we are chasing those back and kind of attributing back to those departments at the same time. And so I don't think we'll hit that budget. That money will have kind of gone elsewhere. But overall, I don't know if we'll hit that larger number that we budgeted for in general.
Good.
So,
All right, thank you.
yep.
Other questions? Keep looking back and forth. Okay, go ahead.
And then just, those are really like our large kind of items, but I do want to talk a little bit about some other ones that do show up. But we do have operating supplies, 7215. We do have community development has some very expensive printers that require very expensive ink and paper, and so we were kind of a little bit behind on buying some of those things, but we are budgeting for them, and we found out that like our printer ink, which is, I think it pushes close to $1,000 when we have to replace them, but it does have an electronic expiration, so they actually, even though they could be half full, the printer is not allowed to use them when they electronically expire. And so, but that's when you have like a $40,000 or $50,000 printer that prints large format, I guess that's because the ink does go bad. But anyway, so we do have some budgeted things in there for that. And also a lot of our computer software pieces are so that we can support the GIS work that we are doing, and supporting other departments that way. So there are some increases in 7215 and 7022 and 7222. And then just to address some travel and planning, travel and training, 7302 and 7303, and both, I would say both for the community development budget and the planning and zoning budget. these are budgets so that each staff, like most staff people have not traveled in a number of years, but we do plan trainings because it's important that our planners are highly trained and that our GIS technician continues to get that so they can kind of stay on the front of those things. So we do have basically a trip and training scheduled for this year for each person. And then also we have our planning and zoning budgeted so that they can go and attend the Alaska Planning Conference in Anchorage, because we feel it's really important that our commissioners get levels of training wherever they're at, whether it's just learning about Robert's Rules of Orders and or else specific decision making and how they can support code in their work.
Okay. Questions? Yeah, Councilmember Calhoun.
Just small things maybe, just for understanding. We bumped up quite a bit advertising. I mean, we went over, so far we've gone over what we budgeted in 2022. But for the next couple of years, we've just about almost tripled what we budgeted in 22. What does that entail, the advertising? That's 7,300.
7,300. Yeah, I think, so the advertising I know does do like public noticing, mailing, those kinds of things. And so those, I would say the amount of, like, how busy we are and how busy we're forecasting to be, I think is going up pretty significantly. So a lot of that is just dealing with public noticing costs, which obviously are not cheap, and just now that I think about it, like the deeper level on that is like buying a lot of signs, public posting signs, stakes, actual physical like envelopes, postage that way as well. So I was just kind of forecasting for how busy we're starting to see ourselves and kind of what we're seeing coming down the pipe in future years. So.
Okay. And I might have missed this, I apologize if I did. As of June, in subscriptions and dues, we're a little over $8,000. And we've only budgeted $2,000 for 23 and for 24. Was there something big as far as, computer programs or something that we had to do this year that made that, because we've gone significantly over the budget for that item?
Yeah, and so what that was doing is we basically bought our own subscription pieces and licenses for that GIS work, so that way we're not paying out those large. Before they can kind of manage the licenses and do some things, but this is way we could buy our own licenses and have that internally. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay.
Anything on planning and zoning either? Okay.
Planning, looks good. We're all happy with that? All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the public with questions or comments on this presentation? All right, so we can move on then to the city manager cab portion. And if you could give us page numbers, it just makes life so much easier.
Starting on page 31 with the city manager budget. And I too am just going to highlight any increases, and of course we'll answer any questions. So the biggest increases really are in 3 line items: travel, subsistence, education and training, and then promotion. So part of, and the year to date is till June, so there's been more expenses since then. But part of in the narrative, it includes the conferences to Anchorage and then 2 out of state. Also the legislative meetings in Juneau and DC. And then there's a typo on, and travel for utility visits. That's true, that's for legislative visits, whether locally or not so much here in Seward, but in Anchorage, driving to those. So those are the costs for that. And part of the costs are really just increasing because of travel costs increase. And I know that you know my philosophy about representing Seward. I love representing Seward, and I do think that it is important to be represented. Just going to what I was concerned was going to be a fluffy thing in Juneau at the Royal Caribbean event where the CEO was introduced. Ended up being, it's an article went into Travel Weekly, which is a worldwide subscription featuring Seward. So by us being there, we were able to get into that subscription. So anyway, also really important to make relationships with our representatives. So that's primary increase. And then promotions is for our legislative guide. So our legislative booklet that we do now, that's where that cost comes from. It's from there. And as you know, that has been very successful. We've heard that a few communities are now modeling theirs after hours, but they just want to copy good things, they can do that. So anyway, those are the larger items. The rest has pretty much stayed the same. There's been some move around as was described by the Carmen Jackson team of things putting where they're supposed to be versus where they've been.
Okay, questions?
Just
Councilmember Calhoun.
minor question on the promotion. Well, we're looking at the legislative priority brochure and stuff. Did we only spend $500 on that this year?
Part of it came out of, most of it came out of, I don't know if it ended up in community development, which we'll revisit that, it did, didn't it? Okay, it was in community development, and now it's actually going to be moved to this budget instead.
Okay, because that just looked like, well,
Yeah.
heck, we only did $500 on it, and all of a sudden it's 5,000 now? Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Demas.
Did you account for the resolution that's at the meeting tonight or the amendment? Okay. But we can amend if needed.
It'll go.
Thank you.
Good question, thank you. Other questions? Okay, seeing none.
Hey, then going to PACAB on page 27, this will be really quick because there are really no changes other than personnel, and as we discussed at our last budget meeting, part of the personnel costs were put in 22 really by me, and now working with the firm, we've decided that there's not an overabundance of costs for personnel, that they're actually going to, and a time spent, so they're going to be put in their departments. So they're not budgeted there. Other than that, it's the same budget. Looks like operating supplies went down to more of an average of what has been spent through the years. There's a small amount in travel and subsistence there was for 22 for any travel and training opportunities that PACAB may have, and they have decided to send one member to AML, so there'll be one member traveling there, so they're budgeting for that cost.
Okay, questions about that? Okay, seeing none.
The other item I wanted to address, and which our chamber director spoke to, is on page 39, and I'm only going to speak to line item 7801, contributions to chamber. The rest of it will be gone through, we need to go through finance budget. But, so this year is a change from what we've done in the past, but it provides for a set amount for the chamber versus the up and down amount the chamber has received. Of course, 21, they were hit, and which would be the budget, the amount they received in 21 from 20, of course, was pretty harsh. It was harder, you know, as far as that reduced amount for budgets. We all were dealing with that, of course. So this provides this consistent amount so that we know for budget purposes and they know for budget purposes. And so this amount is higher than the average that they've received so far. And so I went with that amount.
Okay, questions, comments? Okay. Good explanation.
That's all we really have.
That's
it. I know.
Okay, are there any questions from council or comments on anything that we've heard so far tonight? Jeez. Okay, I guess then, before we come out of the committee, is there any member of the public wishing to speak about this portion? There comes a member of the public now.
I did just want to clarify that the current...
We need your name.
My name is Kat Sorensen. I live inside city limits, and I'm the Seward Chamber of Commerce Director. I did want to clarify that the current percentage, the 50% of the previous year. So this is the year we've been operating off of the 2020 budget, and it has been fun, to say the least. So I do enjoy the idea of having a safety net in place were that to ever happen again, because it has been a bit of a rough year to be the first, my first year as a chamber director. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak on this? Okay, council, are we ready to come out of the committee of the whole? Head nods? All right, I'll move us out of the committee of the whole. And we're back into the special council meeting agenda at 5:55. And that allows us to have the citizen comment period of 5 minutes at the end of meetings if there's any citizen that wishes to comment. Okay, I'm seeing none. So, council and administration comments and responses to citizens' comments. Administration.
Nothing further, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Wells.
Nothing further, thank you.
Councilmember Calhoun.
Now right down.
Councilmember Osenga.
Nothing.
Come on. Councilmember Demas.
I'm good, thank you.
Oh heavens, okay, well, I just want to thank everyone who presented tonight and the citizen who came. And I guess at this point then, at 5:56, I will adjourn the special council meeting.